Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the A to B podcast part 2. We are here talking with Patrick Holcomb. He is an author, retired Marine major, by the way. And we've been having a conversation for the past 45 minutes. We've been talking about his time in the Marine Corps. And I want to make sure that we resume his time in the Marine Corps because he actually got out in 2021. And we want to continue the conversation on how to transition. I actually just learned that he's ran 16 marathons.
16, yeah. 16
marathons. That is crazy. Well, Patrick, thank you for being back with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So let's jump right in it, right? We were talking, the last conversation that we were talking about some of your challenges as a Marine officer, specifically that sometimes you know that when the Marines are not performing to the standards that you need them to, you need to do a firing, right? Now I do want to transition from that, and I want to actually ask you what was your biggest challenge when you were an officer?
You know, I think that varied place to place.
Okay.
Sometimes the biggest challenge was just leading the team.
Okay.
You know, because you would have a large team, diverse, spread across many different missions. So sometimes the personnel part of it and the leadership part of it was challenging. I had other duty stations or other assignments where, you know, I didn't have to manage a large team and it was just solving complex problems.
What would you describe as a complex problem?
Complex problem. So I did an instructor tour. Okay. And during that instructor tour, I had to rewrite an entire curriculum for a course. Okay. And I didn't have a background in curriculum development before that. So there was a learning curve along the way. And I kind of had to figure out how that worked, not just producing the materials, but also using the automated system that the schoolhouse used to store those materials and to track them and keep them for revisions in the future. In a lot of ways, though, that prepared me for scoping out the project of writing a book later on. So, you know, little thing that I did along the way prepared me for something else.
Now, you got out as a major.
I did.
And how long was that? Like, how long were you a major for?
I was about 3 years in grade. So about halfway through. And it was tough, you know, because I did have aspirations for continuing. You know, the door wasn't closed to me by any means. You know, I had room for growth in the organization, and having battalion command was something that I always wanted. But there were compelling reasons to go as well, and eventually that's what I decided to do.
So what was the deciding factor that made you say, like, you know what, it has been a good run, 20 years, I'm out, instead of deciding to pursue, more in the It
was a couple different things. A few different things, really. Number one, I have a daughter who's in high school now, and she had moved around so much to that point in her life that it just didn't seem fair to keep moving her. So at that point, she was entering high school, and I was like, well, you know, if I were to retire now, then I give her the opportunity to stay in place through high school. So I think that was the biggest reason. In addition to that, I looked at the road ahead. And as much as I wanted to pin on lieutenant colonel and have a chance to command, I also knew that there would be years of staff billets in my future. And if I were going to stick around to do that, it would have been like 6 or 7 extra years. And that was just more than I wanted to commit at that point. And then beyond that, it was also just looking at what I would call the opportunity cost. You know, if I'm going to continue doing this, being in the Marine Corps, being an officer for 6 or 7 more years, what am I going to miss out on? And for me, that was enough to say, okay, I'm going to go in a new direction. I love the Marine Corps. I love what the Marine Corps has given me. I'm proud of what I've given back to the organization, but now's the right time.
Well, I can relate to that 100% because that's the same thing. Well, you did 20 and you retired, right? So you still got but I looked at that same opportunity cost, as you called it, of like, man, a lot of people always tell me, because everyone and their mother was telling me, wow, just stay in. It's just 6 years. But I looked at the opportunity cost of staying in, what it meant to stay in another 6 years and putting essentially on pause my dream aspirations for 6 years. And I was like, it's not just the years. It's not just the years, because like almost everybody told me, it's like, well, you can do real estate when you get out. Yeah. But I would have retired at 38. Like I think about it, right? It's like now when you're about to go into your 40s, like that's when you just sit back and chill. And I was like, And I was like, nah, man. Like, I want to make sure that I take advantage of this years because I just don't want to be that guy that's just gets a random job and then all of a sudden, he's just collecting disability and collecting his retirement. He's living good. I'm not saying, that those people live bad, but I didn't see myself being one of those people. I knew that I had better aspirations for that, for my life. So the opportunity cost is definitely something that I can 100% relate. How was that transition for you?
Wild.
Okay.
Yeah,
why?
It was wild. Well, I didn't go straight into a new job. I didn't start the career path that most people do. I took time off to write a book, and that wasn't even the original plan. I pivoted to writing the book. The original plan was finishing something that I had called the 7 and 7 that I'd been working on for a number of years at that point. So I wanted to run a marathon on each of the 7 continents and climb the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. So 7 and 7. And to my knowledge, only 2 people have completed both of those.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a goal for me, and I chipped away at it for years. I completed all of the marathons, including Antarctica, and I was about halfway through the mountains, and then my body started breaking down. And it was a slow process. It was gradual, but the pain started getting worse and worse, hip, back, shoulder. So I had a shoulder surgery the year before I retired, and then I went to climb Denali up in Alaska, so North America's tallest mountain. And I didn't end up summiting. And a lot of that was due to bad luck on summit day, but part of it also was the fact that my body was in pain. And after that, I decided, okay, this hip surgery that I've been putting off for a year already, like it needs to happen. And my dream of completing the 7 and 7 and going to climb Everest after retirement, that was off the table because I had to go and have that hip surgery instead.
Oh, wow. Why? I'm thinking, right? And some people have different types of goals, right? What drove you to wanting to do those 7, like that 7 and 7, as you called it?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I ran my first marathon right before my 30th birthday, and it was out in Hawaii. And it had been a goal for a couple of years already, but I had started training for a couple marathons and had some injuries, and I was like, man, I don't know if I could do this. I was wrong, obviously. I got better at the training. I got better at the running, and once I completed that first one, I was like, man, I like it. I didn't just like the race part of it, but I liked the training leading up to it too.
So yeah, and that was going to be my next question. How is the training? How do you condition your body to go through all that essentially?
It's a lot of running. I mean, that's really what it is. But what I learned over time was you can't always run fast. The key is to have the discipline to go out and run a lot of slow miles. And it's the slow miles that really build your cardio and allow your body time to recover in between those hard runs. And once I started embracing the slow miles, I had less injuries and I got faster.
What was your longest marathon?
Well, a standard marathon is 26.2, and I did 16 of those all over the world, like I said. And then my fastest time was a 2:59.
2 hours and 59?
2 hours, 59 minutes.
26 miles?
Yep.
God damn.
That's 6:52 a mile.
Jesus Christ. Wow, that is congratulations on that. I am very impressed. I am extremely impressed. Okay, now whenever it comes to the summiting part, did you actually get to climb, or did that injury happen like on your first climb?
No. So I had completed a number of mountains leading up to that. The first of the 7 that I did was Kilimanjaro. So that's the tallest mountain in Africa.
In Africa, yeah.
And I did that after my Afghanistan deployment. So deployed to Afghanistan in 2011, came home in November. And I remember being on deployment, and a buddy of mine, really good friend, a guy named Jeff, he's like, we should do something cool when we get back. I was like, yeah, we should do something cool. So we started coming up with ideas, and he was the one who suggested that we go to Africa and climb Kilimanjaro. And I was like, yeah, all about it. Let's go do it. So
how long did it take you?
Took, I don't know, I think 4 days, maybe 5 days. I would have to go back and look at my notes, but somewhere around 4 to 5 days. It's a pretty tall mountain, but it's not technically difficult. So you're really just hiking at high altitude. So it was a great way to kind of break into that world. I got into more technical climbing in the years that would follow, but for me, that was a great initiation. But it was amazing. It was an incredible experience, especially when you get to the top. And we started our summit attempt at around midnight, and it took us hours to get there because you're moving really slow. There's so little oxygen that you really just have to pace yourself.
Do you have to wear like the mask and all that?
No,
stuff?
not at that altitude, but very little oxygen. So you're moving slowly and you're just kind of inching your way up the mountain. And we got there just in time for sunrise. And
awesome.
That was probably the most amazing sunrise I ever saw because there was cloud cover. And then all of a sudden the sun is breaking up through the clouds.
Wow.
So you're looking down onto clouds that are turning orange and pink as the sun comes up. And it was amazing.
Wow. So obviously you had some injuries. You said a shoulder injury that you had to get. Shoulder injury, and then you were putting off a hip injury.
Yeah. I knew I needed the surgery. It was fated. The doctor told me that it had to happen, but I put it off for a long time. Okay,
and essentially once you realize, oh man, I don't know about this 7-7 it's a possibility anymore, that's when you actually shifted to the actual book.
To writing the book. Yeah. I'd had an idea for a while that I would just return to every so often. A lot of times when I was out running, I would just think about it for a few minutes, and it had been floating around in my mind for a couple of years at that point. But I don't think that I ever could have pursued it aggressively enough to get it done if I hadn't had to put the other dream to bed.
Now, what gave you the inspiration to write the book?
So I know the actual date that I had the first idea. It was October 29th, 2014. And I was going through a really difficult time personally. That is not entirely my story to tell, so I won't give all the details. But somebody very close to me that I love very much was ill, and we had to leave Okinawa, where I was stationed, go to San Diego so that she could get treatment. And as we were going through this very uncertain time, I was also watching my San Francisco Giants make a playoff run. So they had won the World Series in 2010. They won again in 2012. So there was talk of this even year magic. So 2014 came around and it's like, oh man, we're in the playoffs again. What's going to happen? So they made this incredible run. Madison Bumgarner was their star pitcher, and he just took the team, put him on his back, and carried him to the playoffs. They got to the World Series, made it to the 7th game, and he ended up coming off the bench on short rest and pitching them to a Game 7 victory. And I sat there watching this, and it was incredible. It was just the most incredible World Series experience I'd ever had. But it was also incredible because it came at such a dark time in my life. And, in the darkness, there was this shaft of brilliant light, and it was that playoff experience. And I remember sitting there in the aftermath of the game thinking, man, this is incredible. I've just experienced something. This full range of human emotion. I have felt something on both ends for the last few weeks. And I don't think a lot of people get the opportunity to feel that. And that was the very seed that was planted in my mind that eventually grew into this book.
Okay, and obviously you're a baseball fan.
I am.
Where did you get the idea for the title of the book?
I got the idea for the title from a couple people telling me, the title that you're working with sucks.
Okay. What was the title before, if you want to share it with us?
It was pretty bad. It was Life in Baseball. It's boring.
Okay.
It's boring.
Okay.
Right? Now I see the light, but it took a couple people telling me that, and I was like, oh man, you hear from one person, and maybe you can just set it aside.
Yeah.
You hear from 2 or 3, and you're like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. So I went back to the drawing board, and I ended up writing a really strong metaphor into the book that explains the title. And it comes pretty near the end, but it all makes sense. Okay.
Now, as I saw in your bio, it is a story, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? It is a story of how multi-generational families essentially meet through like the hardships or throughout some hardships.
Close. Little bit different. So when I say it's a multi-generational story, it's because it's about men in one family and how they live and cope throughout the generations, how they relate to each other. So I tell it in two parts. Part 1 is told from Frank's perspective, Frank Romano. And the first chapter, we pick him up when he's about 5 years old. And by the end of part 1, he's in his mid-30s. Right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then part 2 is told from his son Danny's perspective, right? So you spend the first half of the book getting to know who Frank is and seeing his relationship with his father, which isn't a good one. But the one shared thing that they have is baseball, right? And then in the second part of the book, after you get to know this character so well, you're now seeing that same character through his son's eyes. And it's not quite the same picture, right? So now in the second part of the book, you hear Danny's story, you live and experience Danny's story, and you see it through his eyes, but you also see his interactions with his father, Frank. And you see ripples of Frank's relationship with his own father, right? And that's the multi-generational part of it, is how actions can ripple down through generations and affect children and their children's children.
Wow. Did you get any experience from your military career, or was this something pretty separate? Like, did you know, when you were writing the book, did you know, oh man, I should include this because of this experience that I had in the military? Are there
100%?
Yes? Okay.
Yeah. So I'd never written fiction before. I didn't have any experience with that. I'd done a lot of professional writing, and that helped me. But I do tell people that even though this is a work of fiction, it is very much informed by my life. And I said for a long time that being a Marine made me a better father. Being a father made me a better Marine. Being a Marine and a father made me a better writer.
Wow, that is very deep. I want to take a second because I want to make sure that I ask the right questions, because that is something very deep, and that's something that we've talked about in the podcast before, right? And the reason for it is because sometimes we take our role as a Marine and then we put everything else to the side. But in your story, you tell me that it's different. You're telling me that being a Marine actually made you a better father and vice versa. How? Like, and that's an honest question. Like, how were you able to balance both?
Well, let me start by saying this. I am not perfect as a father or a Marine.
Yeah.
I've made some mistakes.
Okay.
And as a father, I would say there were times where I wasn't present like I wanted to be.
Okay.
And I regret that. You know, I think that I could have been a better, more present father at times. But where being a Marine helped me be a father was the experiences that I had. You know, you work with so many young Marines, and you teach, you coach, you mentor, you help them get through hard things in their lives, and you build up this database of experience. And you bring that into your job as a parent. And you have all the experiences that you can draw upon when your children are having their own tough times. So for me, that helped me a lot.
Okay. Understood. Now, what are some of your goals, you know, with this book? Like, what is your target audience for this novel?
You know, when I started writing this book, I thought I knew my target audience. I thought, well, you know, I'm looking for men between the ages of like 18 and 80 that like baseball. I thought that men in particular would identify with this book because, you know, many of them are fathers, all of them are sons. So there's some common ground there. What I've realized in the months since the book has been completed and I've had advanced readers is that it really resonates with women too.
Interesting.
I've really had great feedback from women talking about the relationships in this book, and in a lot of cases how it helps them better understand men in their lives, their fathers, their brothers, their husbands. So that was a little bit surprising to me, but it's great feedback, you know, and I'm glad to hear that it touches people in that way.
Yeah. So essentially, I'm guessing that there's a lot of references there, obviously, for whenever it comes to the baseball. Now, you know, taking a little side note real quick, because I want to make sure I get your opinion on this. As you know, I'm a baseball fan as well. I'm a Dodgers fan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, no, nobody's perfect.
But it's not too late either.
But but I was a Giants fan too. But there was a Puerto Rican player over there in playing with the Giants. Actually, in 2014, I think he actually played in that game. He was I forgot his name. Can you look him up? He played for Puerto Rico. Yeah, Jose's gonna look him up. He played for the San Francisco Giants. He had like long hair or whatever. I'm gonna give you the name here in a second. But then after that, my wife was a Padres fan, and there was Tatis was playing over there, and then Soto was also playing over there. But then I became a Dodgers fan.
Okay.
But now, there's a lot of things are happening with Ohtani. I don't know if you saw what's happening with Shohei Ohtani.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on that?
I think it's important not to jump to conclusions.
Okay.
If there's anything I learned as a leader of Marines over the years, it's never believe the first report. Scrutinize every piece of information that comes in.
That's a really good one.
Reserve judgment. Wait until the facts are known. And I think that courtesy should be extended both to Shohei Ohtani and to his interpreter. Even though the interpreter has come out and accepted some responsibility, I think it's important that an investigation be conducted, and people shouldn't be jumping to conclusions in the meantime. Wait until all the information is gathered and known.
I that is a very good perspective to have. Here's what I'll tell you. In scandals this big, we will never know the truth. Perhaps. I think that whenever like scandals big like this happen, same thing happened with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing.
Oh, I remember that.
You remember that? Like, they were fighting in court, publicly exposing each other, to all this embarrassing and all this thing. And in reality, at the end of the day, all we have is perspectives. And that's a reality. Now, this is a little bit different because there's money attached to it and you can trace money. But I don't know, like, this seems kind of like wiring money. How are you not going to know $4.5 million jumped out of your account?
When you get that big, you might not even be in charge of your own finances.
True.
I guess you have people who are running that for you in some cases. I would never recommend it, but I mean, that could be.
Yeah. I don't know about my interpreter. That's for sure. I don't know about my interpreter. And I don't know if those people, because that could be true, but I don't know if those people, Angel Pagan. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Angel Pagan. Yeah. So shout out to Angel Pagan. Hey, he was a killer.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was a killer. Yeah. But essentially, going back to your book and to your story. So you're telling me, it's a book that essentially has two different perspectives. One's from the son, one's from the father. And then essentially you walk your audience through the different lenses and the different scopes.
Yeah. So the way that it's broken down, like I said, is there's a part 1 and there's a part 2. Each chapter in the book captures one day in their lives. Right. So what that allowed me to do was write one chapter that's set in 1957, and then the next chapter is set in 1960. Right. So by skipping years in between chapters, I'm able to tell a truly multi-generational story that spans almost 6 decades.
Oh, wow.
The book starts in 1957 and ends in 2016.
Wow. Okay. And what is this the only book that you're planning on writing? Are you planning
right now? It's the only book I'm planning on writing. Yeah. Just focusing on this one right now.
Okay, so you're focusing on this one. What else are you doing besides writing books?
Yeah. So when I had the book ready to be sent out to agents and publishers, I decided, okay, now's the time for me to go back to work. So I started getting the resume ready, started doing networking, set up my LinkedIn, and started reaching out to friends and having interviews and learning about what they were doing and looking at different prospects, and ended up getting an offer from a company called Freedom Flight Works. And I've been there for about 9 months now. Very cool company. Very small, very innovative, making what we call innovative flying machines with military capabilities. So it's prototype development on government contracts. And we have a number of different things in development, but it's a small team. It's really close-knit, kind of reminds me of the Marine Corps in that way.
Nice.
And we're just doing cool stuff.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something very important, and we mentioned this in the part 1 of the podcast as well. It's one thing for you to write a book. It's another one for you to get published.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Can you walk us through how was that experience, from writing the book? It's like, okay, was the book already completed by the time that you were seeking out the publishers? Like, how does that work?
The word completed can be misleading when it comes to a manuscript that is being considered. So I'd been through 3 different drafts of the book at that point, and it gets more complete with each passing draft. And by the end of the 3rd draft, which took me about 11 months to get through the 3rd one, I felt like, okay, this is ready. It's ready for me to start writing what's called a query letter. which is a sales tool. It's basically you pitching your book to agents and sending those out to literary agents who then will decide whether they want to represent you or not. So you go through that process. The idea is that you land an agent, and if you land an agent, then that agent will try to sell your book to a publishing house, one of the large New York publishing houses. That's the dream, right? In reality, it's very, very difficult to even land an agent. And even if you do, there is no guarantee that that agent is going to be able to sell that book. So as I started doing more and more research, I realized that it may not be in my best interest to keep going down what's called the traditional route, the one I just described. So I learned about something called hybrid publishers, right? And hybrid publishers, the best of them, have a very high bar for the manuscripts that they will accept. But at the end, you have more control as an author over your work. You're paid more for it in terms of royalties, and it's easier for you to set the timeline for when the book is being released. And because I wanted to release the book on the 10-year anniversary of that 2014 World Series, this year, 2024, I decided to go the hybrid route instead of sticking with the traditional route.
Okay. And how was that process for you personally, right? Like easy, hard?
It was difficult.
What's the time frame?
It took about a year. It took about a year from the time I had that third draft to the time that I settled on a publisher. So Acorn is the name of the publisher. Really good. Very
I've
reputable.
heard that.
Yeah. They have a great stable of authors, and it's been amazing getting to know some of my fellow Acorns, as we call ourselves, including military authors. You know, there's 3 other ones that I communicate with all the time, and we're always bouncing ideas off each other. We're going to do some events together coming up.
Nice.
Very, very cool. But it was a lengthy process, and it's hard because, you know, you feel when you have a polished product like you're there, like you made it. But the reality is you have a long way to go.
Why is that?
Just because it takes so long, and there's so much more work that goes into it. Working with a professional editor was a challenge. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. In my case, it wasn't that difficult, but I was definitely a little bit scared going in. I mean, having somebody scrutinize this work that you're very proud of and tell you, well, you know, that part's just not good enough. That's tough.
Yeah.
But the editor that I worked with, her name is Kat Ross, and she is amazing. We worked well together, and I would say 7 out of her 10 criticisms were 100% valid, you know? And
do they get the authority to change something in the book?
So that's the other thing that I like about the hybrid process is that the author has the final say.
Okay.
If you go with a big publisher, you're pretty much giving up all creative control, and they're going to do what they want with the book, unless you're a big name like John Grisham.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But for a first-time author, you're giving up control, and they're going to do what they want with that book, and sometimes you're not going to like it.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I always thought like writing a book is like you write the book, and then all of a sudden, you know, because you put it on Amazon or something like that, and then boom, that's it. Like you're published. But no, it's like a complete political system that happens.
There's a whole system and process behind it.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now when this is I think a crucial question for me, at least, because I look at it from a business perspective. I'm a business guy.
Yep.
So I look at it from a business perspective. Now, whenever you find the hybrid publisher, whenever it comes to the sales, how does that work? Do they give you like an upfront for you being signed, or do they just be like, nope, we're going to go based off how many books you sell?
It's actually the other way around.
What do you mean?
You have to pay.
Oh, damn.
Because what you're paying for up front is the reputable name of the publisher. You're paying for that top tier editor and the editing services. You're paying for the support of the publication coordinator, for the design, not just of the cover of the book, but also the interior, how it looks, down to even the type of font that's used and the spacing, right? So you could argue, well, you know, there are people out there that self-publish and they just figure that stuff out. They hire an editor, they hire a person to do the cover art, and you could do that, but having it all under one roof it makes for a much better product. So as the author in the hybrid model, you do pay up front. And then the expectation is that you're recouping that money when the book hits the market, and you get a far bigger percentage of the sales from every book.
Okay. Now, what would be your advice to other maybe military service members that are looking into writing a book, regardless if it's a novel, if it's a self-story or whatever? Like, what would be your recommendation if they want to start?
If they just want to start, learn about writing.
Interesting.
What is it that you're going to write? For a lot of military members, it's going to be either a memoir talking about their time in the military, their life, or it's going to be military fiction. A lot of the time. Not always. My case was totally different. But you need to learn about writing. That was the steepest hurdle for me to overcome, was just learning how to write fiction. And I joke about it, but I started by going to Barnes & Noble. I went to Barnes & Noble and I looked at this whole rack of books about learning how to write, and I picked a bunch of them up and I read them back and I opened it and I started looking through. I selected one of them. I took it home, read it cover to cover, and then did it all over again, and I learned a lot. If I had not taken that time up front, made that investment in learning to write fiction, I never would have been successful.
And what about how much of that, specifically now in the writing world, there is a lot of terms when it comes to AI? Have you experienced that whenever it comes with like working with AI, specifically for your book? Or was your book, do you utilize any type of AI in your...
No, I didn't use any type of AI. And I know that there are tools out there that can do that now. I don't know how well they can do it. It seems a stretch at this point that AI would be able to write even an entire chapter of a book, because you have to feed information into that program to get it to spit out results.
Yeah.
A novel is a very complicated thing, and it requires a lot of thought and a lot of attention, and there are these intricate little details that tie everything together that I don't think AI is capable of understanding yet. Will it in the future? Undoubtedly. I'm sure we'll get there, but right now, no. I think what some writers are doing, though, is using AI to clean up their work.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that as a writer, somebody who did it all on his own, but, it's another tool that people can use.
Got you. Now, very last question that I have for you is...
Yes.
What would be a message that you would send to your audience prior to reading the book to prepare them to read your book? And you can look straight into the camera, so that way you can talk directly to them.
I would say that if you've already picked up the book, you've done so with the notion that this is the right book for you. And I hope that turns out to be true, because it's not just a book about fathers and sons and baseball. It's a book about relationships. It's a book about love and loss and the transformative power of redemption. And if these are the things that you're looking for, then I think you're really going to enjoy the read. And I hope you do.
Awesome. Patrick, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming over here. Thank you for sharing not only about your book, but also sharing your Marine Corps experiences as a leader. Mustang, starting all the way from private all the way to major in 20 years. That is absolutely impressive, brother.
Thank you.
I wish you nothing but the best in everything that you have coming up, whether that be in your program management position, whether it be your book, which I hope is truly a huge success. You gotta let me know. You know where my office is at right now. I will definitely read it. I like to read.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me know, and I will read your book, and I will also give you some feedback on what I thought about the book.
I would love it.
I feel that would actually... I was very interested because I feel that describes my relationship with my father. Believe it or not.
You're not the first to tell me that.
Yeah. Just by you telling me what you told me, I was like, man, that's my relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming over here. Where can people find you at?
You can find me on my author website, which is authorpatrickholcomb.com. LinkedIn, just search for my name and you come right up. Also on Instagram, Forever Giant 2014.
Awesome, guys. And you guys know where you guys can find me. You guys can find me by just simply subscribing to this channel, clicking in the link in the bio, and ensure that you go to all of my social media. My co-host wasn't here today. Barry wasn't here today, but make sure you guys go give him a follow too. We have content that's being released on a daily basis that will increase the amount of value that we bring into your life. So I will see you guys in the next one. In the meantime, make sure that you guys check out any of these videos are popping right here to the side, because again, they will bring extreme value to you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.